What's up and welcome to Champions of Lore, a show about all the kick-ass stories behind some of Idle Champions' coolest campaigns and characters. Every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time here on twitch.tv/CNE Games or later on your favorite podcast service, B. Dave Walters and Erin M. Evans talk about all the Idle Champions lore that's fun to know about. If you're here with us live in the chat, you can leave a question that I, Treavor Bettis, will ask them later in the show. But before we get to that, Erin, B. Dave, take it away.
Hi, I'm Erin M. Evans. I'm the author of the Brimstone Angels Saga, a 6-book series set in the Forgotten Realms, featuring 3 of your favorite Idle Champions, Farida, Havilar, and Mehen. I'm also a content designer for Idle Champions, and I play Cecilia on Dungeon Scrawlers.
Oh, good. Yo, all hands hoist the colors high. All right, I'm not gonna get us defunded. Okay, I'm just saying. I'm just gonna say, heave ho, thieves and beggars. We shall never die. Yeah, B. Dave Walters. I do that. All over the place. Again, I cannot ironically say I'm TV's B. Dave Walters. From the Invitation to Party on G4, the Black Dice Society. We have our holiday special tomorrow night on the WotC Twitch and YouTube at 4 p.m. Pacific. And just anywhere I can be around Erin and Treavor. That's it.
Yeah, this is our last time for the year.
Woo!
Oh,
man.
Did our last writing about dragons and shit last night? We're doing our last Champions Lore today.
Dang.
I'm gonna get to hang out with my friends. But yeah, this is more of a relaxed episode. It is our last episode for the year. We're taking 2 weeks off, and then we'll be back in January. And we thought, what would be a fun way to go out on this than talking about the lore of lore. Lore.
It's like Moon.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's so relaxed. I'm in my Christmas sweater. I didn't even put product in my hair. I just woke up like this.
Literally hashtag woke up like this. Hey,
No big
you
deal.
know what, buddy? Me neither.
I also definitely woke up like this.
I believe it. Like, I just feel like just like a clamshell opens every morning and you just emerge, Erin, from the foam of the sea. Yeah.
But
No, please.
So when we say lore of lore, we're essentially talking about like not just implementing lore, but like coming up with lore and stuff like that. Because like there is, as you've seen with 56 previous episodes, there's a lot of lore in D&D, and that all had to come from somewhere. So
Ed Greenwood.
It's just Ed Greenwood. He's in a back room at WotC just typing away.
There it is. Yeah. But still like on a mechanical typewriter. Like they don't let him have a keyboard, you know what I mean? It's just like
you just hear the sound from the outside. What's in there? Wizards.
Literally a wizard did it.
Yeah.
So I thought it would be kind of fun to first part of this actually kind of end up doing like a writing about dragons and shit episode where we just talk about like when you want to, like, if you're sitting down and you're homebrewing your own thing, how do you just go about making some lore?
I mean, you guys have kind of seen us do it a few times here. Like Dagald Neverember is a treant.
Yep.
That Orcus is secretly in love with the Raven Queen. It's just things that make sense that then you just stick to it consistently. I will say one thing that varies is in D&D, the lore is quote unquote true, but still changes a bunch. So it's like, here's what happened, except that's no longer what happened. This other thing happened. And you're just like, oh, okay. Whereas you take something like Vampire, where vampires lie. The lore is never meant to be believed. So, you can you got to establish up front is what kind of story are you telling? Are you telling a story where the past is fixed? Are you telling a story where the past is highly mutable?
I really do love that Vampire put in that get out of jail free card for themselves.
Yeah, man. They're like, yeah. You know what happened? There was like 6 eyewitnesses and 4 of them are lying. Yeah, right.
This is definitely a way that lore inconsistencies or shifts sometimes get explained. Is it's an unreliable narrator. This is someone's story of this, or this is propaganda, and depending on the factions that you're playing with, that becomes way easier to believe. The fact that there's at least 8 different stories of how did Asmodeus come to be. Well, guess what? Propaganda is big in the 9 hells. The story is what they tell you it is. And that's what you repeat. That's easy, right? I think too, there is a lot of lore. None of it is required. Just what you choose, right? And if you're trying to make something while holding on to pieces of that, I think it's fun to find those gaps where it's like, if this is true and this is true, what does that mean for this? Sorry.
You're just really getting them in there with the sound effects.
If someone says this is true about this thing and someone says that is true about this thing, how can both of those be true? I find stuff like that fun. But yeah, I don't know if I'm answering your question.
No. That's it. I mean, still good answers. It's essentially just like if you were to sit down and try and make your own lore for your.
You already know what I'm gonna say.
I'll wait for him to sit down. I'll take longer on the question.
No. You already know what I'm gonna say, but please continue with your question.
So yeah, the question is like, what do you do when you're sitting down to make some lore, but also think about lore that is going to be important that is going to be able to come across in your games, because that's the biggest thing. Is, I mean, B-Dave's going to say not a lot of people are going to want to sit there and listen to your 5,000 years of backstory.
You don't need 5,000 years of backstory. What do you need, B-Dave? Say the magic word.
George R. R. Martin's dead to me. Wait, no, the other magic words. Shoot. That's
Wrong
also
show!
True. That's also true. For 1,000 generations, the Jedi were the peacekeepers of the Old Republic. That's your inciting incident. I think for the most part, ideally, when you're doing it right, the lore should be emergent. I mean, obviously, we've spent over a year talking about the lore and background of things, but those are things that should kind of come out of the story. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's incredibly self-indulgent to cite something I did, but it's not just something I did, it's something Idle Champions did, which during the Trials of Mount Tiamat, rather than have me, at no point was I like, Tiamat was one of the inciting incidents of reality. She said it, and she said it in the context of being mad. I don't get credit for having helped create everything. Like, what's wrong with you? You wouldn't be here without me, but then that's how you get that in. I very much could have been like, oh, friends, hearken back to the dawn of creation when Bahamut and Tiamat's face was on the waves. And everybody's like, So
yeah, no, that's kind of what I end up like, why I love D&D lore and will make up bits and pieces of it for my own stuff is for like what B-Dave was saying right there with Tiamat, where it's something that I can pull on for this character to say in the moment that has weight to it. It sounds like it has weight to it. Like Obi-Wan saying for 1,000 generations, like that one sentence put so much weight on what the Jedi were. And it wasn't, going back and talking about the High Republic or the Null or the Sith or anything like that. It was just one sentence that put it in there. But
yeah, again, because I draw on this constantly because it's the best example. You get so much. You're like 1,000 generations. Oh, a really long time. The Jedi,
really long time.
Exactly. Were the peacekeepers. Oh, they're not anymore. Something must have happened to them. The Old Republic. What Old Republic? Is there a new Republic? Like, what do you mean? You get, there's so much narrative density in that one sentence that the movie then that you're like, well, tell me about it. And it's like, no, we're just going to go. Yeah, apparently a princess needs my help. Also, stormtroopers killed your family. That's bad. And then you're like, oh, a galactic fascist empire is in charge that apparently did away with the Old Republic and the Jedi. It's implied. And a Jedi coming back is a good thing because they used to be the peacekeepers. So if you are one now, that means you're going to beat the evil fascist empire. I got it. I got it.
Yeah.
So
it's really definitely done.
Yeah. Yeah. So oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I'm bouncing into a different direction. So you finish.
You're it's no, please tangent away. I was just going. I was just going to say that again, it's self-indulgent to quote myself, but I'm having to go through this with Invitation to Party, where I have players and an audience that don't know any of these things, but I'm still very much beholden to them. So when Minter per Moonsilver shows up as one of the Harpers, well, what's a Harper? We're the secret protectors of Waterdeep. Okay. You know what I mean? Exactly. Yeah. I could have been like, well, the Harpers are
you should pick up Lesser Evils by Erin M. Evans.
Right.
I'm sure everybody wants to read a novel in order to play their game, though.
I mean, that's just objectively true that you should pick up Lesser Evils by Erin M. Evans.
It's true.
Available in digital and audiobook. Yeah. That's just facts. But all of this stuff, like the getting across like what the Xanathar Guild is, who Laryl Silverhand is. I mean, I have just a couple of words. Like I described Laryl Silverhand to the cast as President Wonder Woman.
I like it.
It's so good.
I was like, that's who she is. You know what I mean? When you're wondering how you should interact with her, that's who she is.
And you know what? From now on, I will just picture Linda Carter as Laurel Silverhand.
Slap some silver hair on her and boom,
hell yeah.
Done. It's not that, but they get it, like, I mean, I could have been like, well, she's a chosen daughter of Mystra. And they're like, they're like, what's a Mystra? Yeah. You know what I mean? Like I have to, you have to serve it in enough information that you should understand that. They say, hey, she's President Wonder Woman. The Harpers are basically the Jedi. The Xanathar Guild are the mob, but you show them. And I mean, again, show don't tell both gets overused and super cliche and is also still super accurate. That the fact that they knew when the Xanathar Guild showed up, they knew all this stuff about them in advance. The City Watch comes towards them and they just are like, hey, back off. And the City Watch do, like they've been this scourge to the characters this entire time. These people with a wave of the hand can fix it. And they're like, yeah, there's a lot we can do. Just, stay on our good side or we will find you, like done. Yeah. So
I think another thing when you're choosing what lore to include and you're choosing what to add or adapt or remove, that's exactly the kind of thing. Look at your players, think about what your players want. Because if you've got someone and they really want to have that experience of being someone who could be a great protector, but the organization that would suit them has fallen, you could use the Harpers. You could use a very specific model of Harpers, right? And you can choose to say, okay, this is Harpers during sort of the fourth edition. We've come out of the Wailing Years. We're trying to pull this organization back together and it's not going great. Versus the, hey, we're all good and we work like this kind of version, or the sort of old second edition version where, we're sort of super spies, but we're a little obvious about it. But we're fun and bouncy, right? There's lots of ways to shift it based on what they want to play with. And I think too, that being willing to sort of make those adaptations so that you have something that hooks your players is important. And that might mean tweaking things. And it might mean, hey, you should drop in over here where that story fits really well. I was in a game once with a player we were playing with, canon. Obviously you can call things canon, Forgotten Realms, but or Eberron or whatever, like you're starting with that, but you're, by existing in this world, in this game, you are changing the canon. So I don't feel too tied up in that, but you start in a place and he didn't really know a lot about the setting, and what he did not want was to be like, well, actually you can't do this kind of thing, and that's no fun. But at the same time, like, he wants to fit into this game, and one of the things we pointed out is like that setting is enormous. There is everything in the Forgotten Realms somewhere. So if you're playing in a pre-existing setting and your player says, this is the kind of thing I want, you can do that sort of research if you want to stick to the setting and
Mhm.
find the place where that works and kind of help them build into it.
Yeah.
Or again, you're free to say, okay, guess what? Earl Khazar doesn't exist. What's there instead is a theocratic kingdom of elves and dragonborn that are trying to wage war, but my guy got out. Like,
Mhm.
okay.
Yep.
The D&D police will not come to your house. Promise.
You
I
just
mean,
you just
or-
hear a
They really
distant
slack on their
you
job.
hear a distant typewriter down the street. Ed Greenwood's just booking it towards you.
the haunting call of well, actually, off in the distance. The neckbeard clan of dwarves.
Yeah. So, okay, so that's about kind of implementing it and whatnot. But like, do you have any suggestions for making it? Like,
I think the question you got to ask yourself, especially because, again, a mistake I see new creators making again and again when I keep talking about your 5,000 years of lore, is you feel like you must because everyone else has. It's like, well, it's like you what's the story you're trying to tell? To what end? You know, if you're like, I've got this pantheon of 50 gods. I'm like, well, why? I mean, is this a place where there's 50 weeks out of the year and a different god rules each week of the year and they're physically going to be there and affect the characters? And you're like, oh no, it's, Artemisia's week. You know what that means, but
Rhiannon's gonna love that.
Yeah.
It means everybody has to dress perfectly.
Right.
And the house needs to be in perfect order.
Yeah. You're
And
like,
we all love
ugh.
dragons.
Yes.
Exactly. Or she will find you. You know what I mean? I mean, if that's the world, well, then that's important. If that's not going to really matter, and if it's not going to really matter, then if you're like, I want this world to be multi-ethnic and multi-spiritual, there's 50 gods. Okay. You just said that. We know that now. You walk through the temples and you see the temples of many gods. Okay. You know what I mean? You've now scratched that itch.
Yeah.
It's all right. So what does the story need? And then being agile enough that there's times that the characters are going to pull on threads. Like I was talking to Mercer when he came on Demiplanar with me, that he was like, a lot of stuff, especially about like chronology and stuff like that, or not chronology, chronothurgy, chronomancy. That I'm like, chronology is a real thing. It's like a lot of the depth of chronomancy came out of the fact that Liam kept picking at it. That he'd be like this. Well, it's like, well, why? Because of this. And he's like, well, but does that mean this? And he's like, yeah, like it's as to what Erin was saying about what do they want to play. If you mention there's 50 gods and somebody's like, ooh, what are they? Like, can I worship one of them? I want to be a paladin. You know what I mean? And then now the theology is more important. I will also say one last thing, and then I'm gonna be done ranting. Is when Keith Baker was on writing about dragons and shit with us, one of the points he made that I thought was brilliant and has lived rent-free in my head ever since was, if you live in a world where there's resurrection magic, then whoever controls the diamonds controls the world, because the diamond dealers now control life and death. So think about in terms of just something that is going to breathe more life into your world. But it's like, what's that? If it's again, if you live in the Empire, is being a soldier a prestigious thing? Or are you a cog in the wheel? Is it a dictatorship where the people are resistant to it, like 1984, or is it a dictatorship where everybody's kind of rolling with it, like Brave New World? Like, I mean, those things can manifest differently, and then what you need to underpin that will vary. Okay, I'm done talking for now.
I will say, if you are the kind of person who wants to do all that background stuff, like my best friend is this person. Like, when she DMs, she comes in with like a binder like this. But here's the thing. So she might say there's 50 gods and she has them all named and she has like a sense of like the history as much as she wanted to do, but she doesn't push that on us. She waits until someone says something like, I'm really interested in becoming a paladin of somebody, but I want somebody who's a little bit morally flexible. She's like, it's this one or this one, right? She likes being prepared for that stuff, but that's an important part of it, is like, this is a thing you're creating with other people. And so, you know, you've got the things that help you run it, help you build the world, but you don't kind of overdo it. You don't oversteer in that sense. So I think that's the thing. Don't ever feel obligated. If you are that kind of person and you want to do that, like, don't feel hamstrung by it. Don't feel obligated to do it. But if it brings you joy, that's fine. Just, you know, understand that doesn't necessarily bring everybody joy. Yeah. They don't want to hear the list.
it'll make you quicker on the draw when they do want to pick at it, you know, and it will make your world richer when you can kind of just drop these things in passing. I mean, again, as we've said many times, if J.R.R. Tolkien wrote the Silmarillion before The Hobbit, none of us would have ever heard of that.
It's very true.
So, I think another thing is, like, when you are building, one of the things I've noticed watching lots of people sort of do game like DMing and game building, because I've only done a little bit myself, versus what you do for like a novel, right? The novel needs to bend around the characters that you are creating. If you are DMing, it needs to bend around the characters that are playing, which means other people's choices and actions. So you need hooks that grab onto them and make them do choices, do things, take actions, make choices. You can't, it's not very fun if you do something where it's like, follow these NPCs around, they'll do things. And I've seen that in sort of other people's ideas for games sometimes, where they get a little like, you want to control it more, and you center it on those characters you have the control over. And that doesn't work in this medium. That's over here. That's a novel.
I've said if you're prepping for a D&D game and you start writing bullet points for things the characters need to do, you're writing a novel.
And I think, again, this was more the old school way, but sometimes, again, new people make this mistake of the DM showing up with the story they're going to tell versus the story you're telling together. You know, that it's like, this is the story of how you all go fight this dragon and die fighting this dragon. And it's like, it may or may not be that story. I mean, we're all about to find out what this story is. Like, it literally is like sailing. You set out with a destination, you can even have checked the weather report, but I mean, the winds and the tides are going to do what they do. You know, hopefully eventually you end up at your port of call, but you might end up at the bottom of the briny deep, you know?
Or the sad water.
The sad water. There's always sad water. Yeah, man. The sad water ended up being significantly more of a scourge than I anticipated it was going to be. Same thing. Trials of Mount Tiamat. Not Hoist the Colors, although I need you to know that Hoist the Colors is now playing on a loop in my head at the mention of all these sailing analogies. And not only that, the sad water, freaking Averin, the most resistant to the sad water, is the one who spent the most time in it. Somebody else would have been dead if they'd had his rolls. So it's great.
Like the taking it to an opposite thing though, of like knowing the lore, like, you know, we say in the shows, like, it's the lore that's fun to know about. Like, I know a unnecessarily large amount of Star Wars lore, like, just
same.
And to the point that currently right now I am running a Star Wars RPG for my friends, and I do not prep the game ahead of time. I just sit down and go, where you want to go, and I just like, okay, this works, here's this, the hyperspace lanes can take you over here, blah 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 blah. And but one of the things that I've been doing, that I've done through several of them, I wrote a lot of Star Wars fan fiction when I was a kid. So much fan fiction. And so I sometimes pull on that and have inserted characters that I used to write about and updated them for it. And it's basically just an archive I can have in the back of my head that I can just pull stuff out and throw into the game at any given moment. And that's why I like knowing about that lore and whatnot, is so that I can do that stuff. I'm getting to the point that I almost can do that with D&D.
Well, this is where I point out yet again that A Darkened Wish began as World of Warcraft fan fiction.
Yep.
Fan fiction pays off, kids. Yep.
Yeah, my players currently don't know it, but there is a thing from my fan fiction they are currently constantly interacting with, and they don't know it, and I love it. And as soon as someone asks, I'm gonna be like, "You activated my trap card. Get ready to hear about all my fan fiction."
They're like, why is this creature from Yoda's species but a go-go dancer? And you're like, why indeed? Yeah, you're like, take a knee. Let me tell you.
Gather around the fire, children.
Exactly. Let me tell you what 17-year-old Treavor was into. Yeah.
God, you really nailed when I was writing that.
It's like I know you, buddy.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. God, dude, I looked down at the chat and I just see Go Goda. Well done. Well done.
Yeah, we're ruining our sync with additional claps for you. Yes.
Make that the code. Can you make it the code for the podcast?
You know what? I can write it down. Maybe. I'm not saying it's gonna be. But you know, I'll put it down as a possibility.
I'm just saying we need some Go Goda fan art.
No, we do not.
No, we do.
But we do. We do. Also,
do.
that's how you make lore. You just saw it happen. That's it right there.
Happening live.
We'll do it live.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Goda.
Go Goda.
Now I have to Google it. I'm sure it's out there. Oh no. Oh no.
What Jay put it? Oh god, Jay put a suggestion in the chat, or in our text doc. Perhaps I will use that one. So okay,
I don't know if the internet has both is made me proud or made me disappointed. I'm not sure.
As with the internet, constantly both.
That's true.
Yeah.
Porque no los dos.
Yeah.
Yep.
So like you were talking about with like, you know, you have 50 gods. I liked the reasoning for that you put in there. And that's kind of the thing that I always hope for when someone's talking to me about, you know, their 1,000 pages of backstory for their D&D game. But it does sometimes feel like it is disconnected like that these are just separate things that have all been placed into this world and nothing quite connects together. And those are always the things for me that I love. I love the little cross sections of things where it's just like, okay, well, yeah, this is the god of happiness, sunshine, and flowers, and they've got this week of the calendar that's theirs, and their church, you know, just goes all out in it. But this other church freaking hates them. They are the worst. But this other church is actually in ties with this mob-like thing that's run by a dragon, and they're paying them to mess up. I love little things like that.
You know, I think now I just mentioned that off the top of the dome, but I think I'm really gonna have to take on a world where there's 50 gods and each god gets a week.
Yeah.
Especially because if you're like, how many weeks are there in the year? Are there 50 or they're 52 or they're 54? Like, what's happened in the weeks that no one's got?
Yeah.
The 2 weeks that shall not be named.
When they 2 weeks for fighting and then 2 weeks for settling out what the next calendar looks like.
They have
2 week god brawl.
They have to negotiate shared custody.
The weeks change for the gods. It's their initiative tracker.
Yes.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, no reason not. I mean, there's holidays that we're like, you know, Easter is the first Sunday after the first full moon after the equinox. You know what I mean? Like when Hanukkah moves, like why not? Yeah. And imagine how confusing that is. Because then if there's a certain time of the year that is like really nice and sunny and everything, but the god of darkness wins that year and everybody has to stay inside. Yeah.
That's like the most terrifying Groundhog's Day ever.
That's the name of the story. How did you know?
Oh no, the god of time, god of week. We're just gonna live the same week over the whole year.
True. It's like, hope you made it a good one. Yeah. Guess what you're doing tomorrow? Everything you did today. Yeah.
Oh no.
I think too, you get a lot of those crossover points when you make sure the world has places for your players to anchor into it. And this is something I really appreciate in a D&D game, is a way to sort of understand how I fit into it. I know a lot of people just like making D&D characters because it's fun to make D&D characters, but I need context. I get really stressed out if I don't understand how my character fits into the world. And if the DM doesn't help me do it, I just start throwing down anchors and making up stuff so I know where I stand and how I fit in. But if you help your players do that, or you pick up things they throw down and you build on them, that can help you draw them into those things and connect them, so that, because I think that's a big piece of what makes that appealing, is that it feels lived in.
Yes.
Right? In the real world, things touch and they overlap. Sometimes in fantasy writing, you'll especially see like, here is country A and here is country B, and they don't interact. This is the land of the horse riders, and this is the land of the theocratic paladin people, and you don't ever have people who are nomadic paladins. That doesn't happen, except that does happen. It happens all the time in real life, right? Like we intersect, we interact, and things cross over, right? It's not like, here's the hard line between, the worshipers of the, this is also comes into things when you're talking about pantheons. In a polytheistic religion, you don't usually pick one god and that's your god. But a lot of times with D&D, we say like, oh, well, I worship Sunni. That's it. I just worship Sunni.
This is my whole deal right here. I went all in on this one god.
Right. Like there's going to be like preferences, sure. But this is also, I will get in loud arguments on the internet about, things like everybody in Forgotten Realms worships Shar a little bit. Because Shar, she's real bad, but she's the goddess of loss. She's the one you turn to when you are grieving. And the idea is you go, here's a little bit of worship. Now let me go. I want to go back to where I was.
I love how you look like you were feeding ducks. You just pull a little bread. They're little worship.
And I think making sure that you don't like lock things into sort of discrete boxes also helps you get that crossover.
Yeah.
This always comes back to that, something we were alluding to last night on Writing About Dragons and shit, available wherever fine podcasts can be located, with the hunkiest hosts in the world, most beautiful people. It's a shame it's audio only.
For now.
But I made that post about fantasy world building versus real world building, where we think we have to go through these huge elaborate gymnastics to name places and make things, whereas again, mahi is like a fish. There's so many places that it's just like Sioux Falls, because there's falls in the Lakota Sioux were here. It's Sioux Falls. Like things don't have to be terribly complicated. And then as we've brought up before, it always is weird to me with evil gods and goddesses, like Umberlee and stuff. But we've talked about like you worship Umberlee to appease Umberlee. You're like, Umberlee, please be cool. You know what I mean? Like the Jurassic World walking in with the clicker and the velociraptors. You're like, I'm dropping gold in the ocean, Umberlee. I'm dropping gold in the ocean. Right? I mean, everything's gonna be cool. Yeah. So there can be a lot of ways that your stuff interfaces. And I think one thing we haven't mentioned is history can be a good framework too. I mean, Game of Thrones is basically the War of the Roses. Yeah. Like most of Game of Thrones kind of actually happened, sort of, kind of. But that was a framework for it. So, a lot of times if you're not sure, look at something like the 100 Years' War or something, of just like roughly what happened, like what were they fighting over, who ultimately won, and how that conflict wave. I would also submit, contrary to popular opinion, Mordor doesn't necessarily have to lose. It depends on what story that you're telling. Hey, I was there when the Strength of Men failed. Okay, Isildur had his chance.
Well, actually, I see actually right behind you have the Mistborn books, and that's
a good eye.
That's the premise. I worked at a Barnes and Noble. I know that box set like back of my hand. I stock a lot of them. But no, like that's essentially what that one is. Where like the premise was, what if the bad guy won? And like that's where we pick up is like, yeah, the bad guy won like a long time ago and has been ruling, and you just got to deal with it. I started a campaign once with that premise, and it fell through, and I was really sad because I had 100% went way too far on that, where I was just like, all right, it's these 10 evil people and they're the rulers, and I'm gonna write all the backstory for all of them and everything, and then we didn't even get to use it.
I mean, to a certain extent, obviously, if you're playing a hero, obviously, you people expect good to prevail, unless people know it's a tragedy. I mean, for the most part in D&D, arguably most games, but in D&D in particular, you're usually playing the good guys. You don't have to, but you usually are. And there's a presumption of success, It's so I would thread a line there between a D&D campaign and a narrative. I mean, again, Black Dice Society, Ravenloft, they lose a lot and have a lot of Pyrrhic victories where it's like, we won, but at what cost, because that's that story. It's a horror story. So you have to decide what it is that you're trying to do and trying to communicate. But okay, I'm done monologuing again.
That's okay. I actually want to check in with the viewers for a bit, because we've actually gotten some pretty good questions that I think we can talk about for the rest of the show.
I don't know if Obo Lauren's in chat, but Obo Lauren, we answered one of your questions on the podcast.
We
last
did.
night, which was a very interesting question. If you want to know what she asked, you got to listen to the recording. But it was
I actually want to start with Nan Bread Loaf's question. Any advice for getting players to anchor their characters? I have a bunch of players with no backstories, and I actually have one for this. Because this happened in my Curse of Strahd game, where one of my players was like, I really like the idea of this character. I have no idea what their backstory is. And I essentially was like, hey, how about we work on something, but can I also have permission to like mess with that backstory a bit on my own? And they were like, yeah, sure. So we did. We sat down, we came up with a backstory for their character, and they were really happy with it. And then halfway through Curse of Strahd, I pulled a twist with the character, and they were like, that's freaking awesome. I love that. So that was by working with them and then tying that backstory into the plot that we had going and making it an important part of their plan, gave them that anchor, and they've straight up told me, like, that's my favorite character I've played like in a long time. They've taken that character and put them in other games as NPCs. They love them so much. Nice. Yeah. But yeah, that's my advice for it.
This is similar to what I'm inclined to say. There was a game I played in for a long time, and when I started, it was a homebrew setting. I didn't totally understand the parameters of it, and I was very busy. And I was like, I want to play a paladin. I would like to start out playing just a straight paladin. I would like to be challenged, and I'm going to be a half elf. And the DM came back to me and said, okay, well, there's this place that sort of is ruled by this god of order. So that would be a good place to be a paladin, and the elves all live on this island out here. So is it your mom or your dad? And are, maybe they've gone back to this island, which is like, okay, yeah. So maybe my dad's a crooked merchant and my mom is an elf who bailed, and I'm like trying to like reset my life by being this paladin. She's like, cool. Now the god of the crossroads is going to leave you a sword and it's going to do things, but you don't get to know until later. And so this build up made one of my favorite characters, because the DM was willing to go back and forth and also like take things she'd already done, but then also like help bend things to the suggestions that I made. Like there was a back and forth there that let me find those things I wanted. It wasn't just, your mom's from the elf island, so you want to go back to the elf island. Like, no, I want to have complicated feelings about going to the elf island because I don't feel like an elf. And that back and forth to help find the anchors that are going to be appealing, that you're going to want to turn towards story points about, I think are really important. Because it isn't just about like, where do I fit in the world, but how do I move through the world with these attachment points?
I like that.
I would submit that I would question why you want them to anchor it a lot, and what is it that you're trying to get out of it, because this seems like one of those times that you need to make sure that you're playing the same game.
Yes, that is also
Okay.
very true.
Yeah, because for them, they're like, I'm an orc assassin, man. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where are you from? The East. I don't care. Like, that's like give them the far traveler backstory and then roll with it, and then and it can come out of the play that if while they're playing, they're like, oh, I've been fighting a long time. Ooh, are you a veteran? Well, maybe were you a veteran from here, from there, and again, let it emerge. So
I would be the snarky DM though, that I would like, I come from the East, I don't care. I'd be like, all right, so there's this country called I don't care.
Another thing that can be sort of fun. I find it imperfect, but I've played in games where the session 0 was with a game of Fiasco.
Oh,
and so
love Fiasco.
It is a lot of fun. It's a storytelling game, so you will sort of either, when it's your turn, decide how a scene starts, or you decide how a scene ends, and then the other people help tell the story. And another thing is you'll kind of roll randomly, and then you'll choose things, and you'll decide like, how do you connect to the person next to you, and you can kind of build this. We actually did this for Dungeon Scrawlers, and this is why Cecilia and Artemisia are sisters, because of a random dice roll. And we were like, hey, actually, I like that. Let's go with that.
That's cool.
The only thing is, the best games of Fiasco I've played, there is no expectation of things being like stable at the end. Whereas a session 0, there is a little bit of expectation of all of our players, all the characters are going to continue into the game. So it gets a little stiff in a way that I'm like, oh, I did really like it when I could, be a murder ghost or something. But it's fun. What was it? I played Invisible Sun before too. It has a similar thing where you're building each other's houses, because your house is sort of an important aspect, and so other people will sort of throw in things about your house, and you can kind of shift them into position to be something that, and your neighborhood too. Like, so these things, how you fit into the world is partly designed by the party, to sort of get to something that feels like it connects everybody together, which is how we ended up hanging out in a haunted CrossFit gym.
Again, whomst among us has not ended up in a haunted CrossFit gym?
I know you're all jealous. It was haunted by luchador ghosts.
Oh.
I mean, why'd you leave?
Yeah.
Because we had to avenge them.
Oh no, that makes sense. I will say also what these things are useful for, though, and what session 0s in general are, and relationship maps and all of that, it saves you a bunch of narrative lift of the man in black in the tavern.
Yeah.
And like, why are we going to figure this out? As I've said so many times, often this game is like, hey, strangers, want to go camping for 6 months and become gods?
Yeah.
And you're like, that's what happens. And then especially if you've got the lawful good paladin and the chaotic neutral rogue, and the rogue is like indiscriminately robbing and murdering people, and the paladin would intervene, you need some reason why these people coexist that gives them something. But dropping them in a shared meat grinder is as good a rationale as any. So yeah,
I will also suggest looking at, I mean, it's not quite usable for D&D, but it gives you a good idea of stuff. Monster of the Week has an absolutely amazing group building thing for session 0, where it's literally just like, okay, if you have a this type of character and this type of character, and these are the options for how you know each other, and like everyone has to know someone somehow, and it's a lot of fun. I will also suggest checking out, this is more for world building, but there's a game called, I think it's called 1 Year. They used it on the Adventure Zone for the most recent series that they're doing. In fact, the first like 5 or 7 episodes is them playing it and building the world they're now doing their game in. So I suggest that one as well. Let's see. Rex Verde says, showing an RPG sets the memory more than telling. When a threat shows itself as a threat through actions, it stinks. Like I don't know. There's certain things that I feel like are good for showing and telling. Yeah,
Read that again. I don't think I- I
I'm
don't think I
confused
got
about
that.
this.
I don't
When
think I
a
understood
threat
that, yeah.
shows itself as a threat through action, it stinks. I don't, or no, it sticks. I'm sorry. I haven't had
Oh.
enough. Yeah, it's not stinks. It sticks. Yeah.
Right.
That is 100% true. I did a horror one shot last year in my D&D game, and I did that by having them fight a really hard enemy. And they were like, man, we almost didn't get through that. And then another one showed up and just one hit the one they just fought.
Oh dear.
And they were like, we gotta go.
And that's the wrestling model of how you put over the big bad.
Yes.
It wrecks the previous big bad. You're like, oh, that's now the Worf effect. Yeah. That's
This giant monster comes out. Bah, bah, da, bah.
How'd they see it? Did it have greater invisibility? Yeah.
This is also kind of ties into a thing about threats that you can steal from books. I think it still applies. Is that death is like, oh, we might die is okay. Yeah, that's bad. But it's also a little abstracted. Like it's hard to kind of really feel it most of the time.
Especially when you have
bizarre.
that second character sheet sitting right there.
Yeah, there's that too. If it's like, oh, right, the entire Western Hemisphere will be wiped off the map. That feels a little more thing. But if it's, oh, your village where your sweet aunt still lives will be destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
You got to put a face on the cost. Yeah. This I tell you, friends and neighbors, one thing that you never go wrong with is not you're gonna die, he's gonna die.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if you mess up, Trevor's screwed. Good luck. That is when you see, like, because it doesn't matter whether or not Trevor's got another character sheet.
Yeah.
You're like, oh no.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
Alternately, this is how you find out that your players actually hate that NPC.
Well,
that's good to know too.
I had a player once who was very devil may care with their actions, and long story short, basically had a cannonball assault happen on Baldur's Gate. And when I tell people about this, they're like, so the city guard killed him. I went, no, they took him to court and I made him face all the things that he did. Killing him would teach him nothing. St. James came in and was his attorney.
Oh my god.
It was so good. Let's see. There's another one in here I wanted to read. This is from I think it's Charke 151. So then isn't it rather daunting if the DM isn't a local lore master? The anxiety of not knowing enough might inhibit a D&D group from forming.
No. Yeah, this again. So this is honestly true. Those of you that were back with us in the beginning, in the halcyon days of last October when we started this show, the initial opening was Treavor would say all the D&D lore that you have to know, and both Erin and I were like, but you don't know.
That's why I changed it to fun.
That's why we changed it to fun to know. You really don't.
Yeah.
It's like, look, man, it works how it works in your village.
Yeah.
Like, here's some elves, here's some dwarves, here's some orcs. We're gonna go. There's a dungeon under that mountain because I said it is.
Yeah.
You know, and have some fun.
When I was running 4th edition back in the day, I had you know
Stop it.
I had world built my own thing and whatnot, and I just kind of put whatever I want from D&D in it. And there was one time that we had some friends over, and they made their own characters that were just going to be in that one session. And the group was on a boat going through kind of this glacial valley, and all of a sudden off the cliffs of the glaciers, like these drow pirates jumped down and started fighting them on the boat and whatnot. And one of the people that was there that was guessing was just like, but didn't you say it's daytime? And I was like, yeah. They're like, drow don't go out in the day. I went, these do. I don't care.
they got big coffee hats.
Here.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I was just like, I don't really care. Like, it looked cool.
They got the Jarlaxle big hats and exposed midriff. You know,
rainbow capes.
That's it.
Brings you joy as a DM to like read all the deep lore and stick to it, and that makes you feel comfortable and ready to like present a cool story. No one's saying don't do that.
Yeah.
But do not feel like you have to
Absolutely
do it,
not.
because there is a there's so much, even if you absorbed all the lore that has been written about Forgotten Realms in the entirety of its existence, your players still might go, but what's over there? And guess what?
They're
Nobody wrote
going
about that.
to.
They're going
Yeah.
to.
They're going to.
Yeah.
Odds are excellent.
Well, I would a few things. One, I would say, even as somebody that knows a thing or two about the lore, I could justify a daytime drow raid if what was on the boat was worth the risk.
Mhm.
You know, if they're like, if the boat's here now and we want it, we got to come out and do what we do. You
Mhm.
know, like the boat's not gonna be here at midnight. The boat's here now. So
That also
drow-
just shows you that what's on that boat is really valuable.
Yep,
Right.
exactly.
That shows you the drow are really serious. Like,
Yeah,
Mhm.
so that's actually a win. I was going, a friend of mine is setting up a new campaign, and they're a new storyteller that are going to be running a game for some very experienced players and storytellers. And I told them this same thing, that I was like, set it outside the major area then.
Mhm.
Like, if you're worried that you don't know everything about Sharn and Eberron, don't put the story in Sharn and Eberron.
Yep.
You know, it's like, we're on the frontier. Where? The far frontier. Oh, okay. You know what I mean? In action.
Yeah.
You know, and I also told this same friend, I was like, plan, because they were like, how do I plan? And I was like, I will help you with that, but understand 50 to 75% of what you plan will not happen.
Oh yeah.
All the way back to the example, I'll give you two personal examples. Season 2 of A Darkened Wish, them dealing with the mind flayers inside Skullport was supposed to be 3 episodes. It ended up being the entire season because interesting stuff kept happening.
Mhm.
And no one else knew my plan. No one else knew it was
Yep.
supposed to be 3 episodes, so we just followed through where it went. And LA by Night, same thing. The LA by Night was supposed to be a vastly different story, and in episode 1 we were like, you know, like, guess we're going that way. Yeah, like, it was a vastly different story, but when we actually started doing it, we were like, oh, that's no longer the story, it's now this thing. And that happens pretty much all the time. The only thing you can control is your inciting incident.
Yep. All right, I'm gonna pose this last question, then we'll start wrapping up for the year. Rex Verde comes back and says, question, how do you handle lore that the player knows but that the character doesn't? Flip it and reverse it where it is possible, or just roll with it.
sorry.
No, please, you.
Speaking as someone who frequently is in this situation, I feel like this is on the player to sort of embrace it, like play your character.
Yep.
And that can be difficult sometimes when you're like, okay, but I know that this thing is immune to poison and all of my spells are poison spells. Like, you know, this is an opportunity for some fun role play. Also, you hit it with the poison spell and nothing happens. You figured it out.
Yep.
Like, a lot of the times the things that you might know that are sort of in the monster manual, like, oh, this has legendary resistances, right? You can still sort of make the suboptimal choice and discover the thing fairly quickly, and find a way to have fun with that isn't, you know, just I hit it really hard, which is satisfying. But I think you just have to sort of split it and split your brain a little and be like, okay, Cecilia knows this and Erin knows this, so I have to lean on this part. But then, I mean, there's also times when, like, does it matter if I don't use the poison spell and I choose the ice spell because I know the poison spell is not going to work? I might have done that anyway. If it's something more like, oh, I know if we go talk to, you know, the Cromark, that they're possessed by a mind flayer, they're going through Ceramorphous, so I can't say that word, but my character doesn't know it, right? Like, just go and like play through that and find it out. It's okay, right? Like, separating those things is sort of just part of like engaging with the story.
Metagaming is an issue. I run into this a lot, especially in high stakes situations where people are like, I know they've got 3 legendary actions. I'm like, but your character doesn't. They don't.
Yeah.
What I'll come down, because more than once I've had to be like, your character doesn't know that, and I will say it straight up. But what I will always do is I will always allow for a history roll.
Yep.
Because maybe you heard it somewhere along the way.
Yep.
You know, like maybe you've never seen a troll ever, but you know your drinking buddy told you like they regenerate and you got to hit them with acid. You know what I mean? I will always dangle that carrot, but it's
I have had that exact role where like we encountered some trolls and I was like, balls, like I know what we got to do. My character doesn't. Like, can I please make an Arcana check or a history check? And I did, and it worked. And so then it's like, okay, how do you know this? And so then you can spin like this story and be like, oh my God, I just remembered something that my teacher said to me when I was 8 about don't go out in the forest because trolls and you don't know any fire spells, right? Or something like you can add a little more texture to the world through that. No, I like the rolls. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Oh, sorry. No, go ahead, Trevor.
Well, with my, like when I'm a player, if there's something that comes up that I know about, when it comes to the character, if I have something in my backstory that I know is in the backstory and has an effect on the character, I'll let the DM know, like, hey, my dude's totally fought trolls before.
My neighbors were trolls growing up.
Yeah, something like that. Like, and see if that's chill with them. But I'll usually ask, can I do a roll to see if I know about this? But then there's been other times, and actually these are kind of more often than the other ones, where I'm just like, oh no, they 100% don't know what this is. I'm not even gonna make a roll. They do not know this. I'm terrified. They're not, because they don't know. They're dumb.
that's also, yeah, you got that you know, that meme of Lando and Darth Vader. You know, it's like when the metagaming character says that's not how it works, you're like, I've altered the stat block, pray I do not alter it further. You know, you're like guess what, this you know, the squirrels in this world have machine gun tails.
I'm gonna say this last story real quick because it is applicable to this, and it goes back to my 4th edition game that I brought up. One of our players was very much like did not do a lot of nerdy stuff or anything like that. Kind of got into D&D just because he was like curious about it and whatnot, really loved it. But I had trolls show up one time, and I described the wounds rehealing on the next turn, and this dude goes, oh, well, we should hit it with fire or poison. And I'm like, what? And he was like, oh yeah, it's just like this old game I used to play when I was a kid, Baldur's Gate. And I'm just like, dude, that's a D&D game. And he's like, oh,
one of us this entire time.
He's like, oh, I know this stuff. Then I was like, you know what? No roll. You know that. You're good. Go for it.
I will also say, yeah, exactly. You win. One last thing, since I know we're trying to wrap it up too. You can circumvent a lot of this by, especially in a horror game. This worked really great in a horror game. You can do it anywhere. Don't call it a troll.
Yeah.
Just, you see a 7-foot green hulking monstrosity with long tusks and you know, sharp claws. Roll initiative.
Yeah.
You know, and they were like, huh, what? And then as you're fighting it, you the slashes start to close up again, you know, and then you're like, oh, and then they're like, is it a troll? You're like, don't know.
It didn't introduce itself.
Exactly. Yep.
Started swinging swords before he could
that is just a great way to ratchet up tension, period, by the way. Like the most because if you're just like gelatinous cube, people are like, oh, okay. But if you're like, you can't see it, but your flesh is burning, you know what I mean? And you're like, what? You're like, the air is burning. It feels kind of gooey and sticky. You're like, what?
Breathe.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Also, it's coming towards you. What? You know? Yeah. It's good.
I love that.
All
right.
My pre-workout's starting to kick in. I'm like,
I'm ready. All right. Well, that is all the time that we've got for lore today. Erin, B-Dave, where can people find you? What awesome things you're working on?
You can find me on Twitter at Erin M. Evans. You can catch me on our podcast, Writing About Dragons and Shit. New episode available later today.
It's already out.
Wherever. Oh, it is? Yep. Okay. Wow. You're fast, Trevor.
Yeah.
So anyway, last episode of the year, available wherever you download your podcasts. You can also find me on Dungeon Scrawlers, on twitch.tv/Dungeon Scrawlers at 6:30 p.m. tonight. We are doing it's kind of a silly holiday episode with a Yankee swap or whatever you call it. And I'm calling it Rusalka's coin purse. That's what we play in Rashomon.
There's at least 2 things you didn't think to mention, ma'am.
I didn't mention concentration check because I don't know if I'm going to do it, but Mondays, usually anyway, I do concentration check, a co-writing show at 1:30 p.m. Pacific, which is a show up and work on your project with me. But I'm still deciding if I'm going to take the 2 weeks off from that because I also have to work on a book. But and then I guess the book is the other thing, but I'm like, you can't pre-order it yet. But coming soon. Fall 2022, my new book, Empire of Exiles from Orbit, is going to be real.
It's happening.
Again, TV's B. Dave Walters. You can catch me Fridays on G4 at 3 p.m. Pacific on G4 Twitch and YouTube for Invitation to Party, and on television Mondays at 3 for Invitation to Party there. Also tomorrow night we have the holiday episode of the Black Dice Society at 4 p.m. Pacific on D&D Twitch and YouTube, and a bunch of other stuff. You can find me all over the interwebs, however fine streaming content can be located. Just follow me at B. Dave Walters, and make sure you pre-order Erin's book as soon as you can.
Yep. You can find me and the way too many podcasts that I do on my Twitter account at the Treavor. There is an A hiding in there, and yeah, that's gonna be it for this year. Thank you to Jay for moderating the chat and doing a fantastic job as always. Thank you to Codename Entertainment for letting us have some fun, talk about some D&D. If you missed any part of this show, you can catch it later today as a podcast on your favorite podcast service. And if there's any topics about D&D and Idle Champions that you'd like us to talk about next year, you can send in those suggestions to championsoflore@codenameentertainment.com.
I know we're finishing up. Can I just say one thing?
Yeah.
Hey, thank you all for tuning in. Thank you for taking this journey with us. Enjoy your holidays with your family and play some games. This is a great time for it. Roll some dice and make some memories.
Hell yes.
That's it.
Love it. Yes. Later today, we've got Mars Guiding Hand again at 1 p.m. And then we've got Sketching Hour at 3 p.m. So be sure to come back and check those out and have some fun. But that is going to do it for this week and this year of episodes. So until 2022, Champions out.